All right, let's go ahead and get started. We're a little late, but my computer's not working, but come on over, Kurt. All right, let's go ahead and start with roll call on the pledge.
Mayor Bagley.
Here.
Council members Christensen. Here. Finley. Martin. Peck. Rodriguez. Here. Waters. Here. Mayor, you have a quorum.
All right, to the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, let's go ahead and move on to the approval of minutes. October 8th, 2019 was a regular session. Do we have a motion to approve the minutes? All right, it's been moved and seconded. The second was moved by Bonnie Finley and seconded by Council Member Waters. Let's go ahead and vote. All right, that passes unanimously. All right, let's move on to agenda revisions and submission of documents. I don't see anything. Nobody's in the queue? Anybody? All right, let's move on. All right, City Manager, do you have a report? Let's go ahead and have it. We've got a presentation of the Distinguished Budget Presentation Award from the Government Finance Officers Association to the City of Longmont for the 2019 operating budget. I believe this is the 8th I have heard.
Mayor, members of council, Sandy Cedar, Assistant City Manager, and I get the chance today to be able to award the Distinguished Budget Presentation Award to the team. The GFOA established the Distinguished Budget Presentation Award in 1984 to encourage and assist state and local governments to prepare budget documents to the highest quality that reflect both guidelines established by the National Advisory Council and GFOA's best practices. Longmont has won this award 28 years in a row.
Oh, sorry,
so
I only heard the last 8, but I'm glad I missed the previous 20, for what it's worth.
And I get the honor of presenting this today to our finance and budget team, which includes Jim Golden, our Chief Financial Officer, Teresa Malloy, our Budget Manager, Sandra Cifuentes, and Melody Polero, who are our budget analysts. And Ann is not here, but she's the one that helps with all the budget documents. So it's my pleasure to present it to them. I just love being able to call out great work. And today, that's what we're going to do for these guys.
Great, thank you.
Yeah.
We gonna get a picture, Jim? What was your first one? This precedes you, right? Predates you, the 28th? How long have you been here at the city? It doesn't? You were here? Wow. We need a time lapse. Were you here for the first one?
I'm not quite sure. We don't have the network card's not showing up at all.
All right, it's all good. All right, next we have a proclamation celebrating November 3rd, 2019 as the 5-year anniversary of Next Light in Longmont, Colorado. And I was going to be sarcastic and give a special thanks to a few of this year's candidates who took credit for Next Light. But anyway, I won't do that. All right, whereas Longmont first envisioned the possibilities of a high-speed fiber optic internet service in 1996, and whereas with substantial approval from local voters, Longmont began building the Next Light network in 2014, whereas Next Light began subscribing customers on November 3rd, 2014, and immediately saw voluminous demand throughout the community, and whereas in 2019, Next Light transformed Longmont into Colorado's first gig city, offering symmetrical gigabit connections citywide without contracts or data caps. And whereas in 2018, Nextlight was named the nation's fastest ISP by PC magazine, and whereas in the 5 years since its inception, Nextlight has received accolades from throughout the country for its speed, quality, and affordability, and whereas the Longmont community has shown its support of Nextlight in ever higher adoption, repeated compliments, and no small amount of community pride, and whereas Nextlight has been a model for communities across Colorado and nationwide and inspired similar projects in the other Platte River Power Authority cities. Now, therefore, I, Brian J. Bagley, Mayor, by virtue of the authority vested in me and the City Council of the City of Longmont, do hereby proclaim November 3rd, 2019 as 5-year anniversary of Nextlight in Longmont, and invite our residents and businesses to join me in celebrating the many achievements of our community-owned network and the exciting future that Longmont is racing to meet at gigabit speed, or gigabit speed. Sorry. I was chuckling because I don't usually write the proclamations, and I didn't write this one, but this one has more oomph than whoever wrote it, man. Yeah, it was far more or less bland than usual. So someone put some thought into it. Signed, the mayor. So if we can invite the representatives from Nextlight to come on up and accept the proclamation. Do you have some things to say?
I do, Mayor Bagley.
Great.
Thank you so much, and members of council. I'm Valerie Dodd. You've seen me once before. I am the executive director for Nextlight. I think I'm 2.5 months into the job, and I'm happy to provide you some quick updates. And am I audible enough? Okay, and that's the one thing I worry about most. And are you my clicker? Okay, this is my clicker, and I should have known this. Okay, so I want to start off, have a little bit of fun. So that was fun. The right button. Okay, I'm getting the hang of this. Okay, some numbers to know. These are important numbers, and I'm going to come back to you, and hopefully these numbers will change in a very favorable fashion. So stay tuned. But first, the number, $15 million. Does that mean anything to anyone? And Dale, you can't answer. Okay, I can't hear any answers. Okay, well, it represents the amount of revenue that Nextlight will bring in 2019. Okay, I thought these were softballs, but let's see. Here's a softball, 20,286. What do we think that represents? Yay! Excellent, you're exactly right. That's how many happy Nextlight customers we have. Next, I'll make it a little easier for you, 30%. That is the percentage of self-installations that our customers are doing today. So that's a somewhat new process whereby customers now, when they sign up for service, provided that there's a drop to their home, they can do a self-install. And so that is representing about almost a third of our customers, and it's a very quick, easy process. So that's a great number, and I hope that's going to incline over the coming months. Next, we have 1.1%. That is the customer churn number. That's the approximate percentage of customers that disconnect in a given month. From an industry standard, that's very low. So that's a wonderful number. We're going to continue to watch that, and we hope to see some declines even further. Next. Okay, here's another softball. Oh, the answer's there. 57% penetration. That is the penetration of premises that we have passed in the city of Longmont. Next, 30 minutes, how fast you can get a pizza, but it's really how fast you can also get internet service from us, provided you pick up your ONT and install it yourself. Really proud of that number. Lastly, 1 billion. That is the hours of Netflix content downloaded in a given week. So that's an important number because that shows the tremendous need that we have for gigabit speed. Okay, so now I'm going to get into the official overview. You've already heard it. We're celebrating our 5th birthday and are super excited to be here doing that with you all. We're not only celebrating, though, this birthday, we're celebrating the success that we've had. We have 57% penetration. It's tremendous. The business case had approximations of about 34%, so we're blowing the doors off in terms of that number. But with the good news comes some opportunity, and you'll probably hear from me again as we seek to do some development in our network to make sure that we have enough capacity for future customers, because we've almost oversold in a few areas, so we've got some opportunity to further our network. But not only are we celebrating, but we're also really transforming. We are transitioning. We're transitioning from building a fiber network to actually building a transformational, sustainable business. So, but to build that business, you also have to have a supporting organization. So we've done some work here to bring the fiber supporting employees out from underneath the power organization, and we've set up a whole new organization to really focus on the next things that we're going to be doing for Next Light. And those things are really going to focus on the employees. Despite the wonderful gigabit network that we have, our employees are still our #1 asset. And employees, we're really in the process of aligning those people to the purpose. Next, it's really about the customer. Not so much the network anymore, now it's about the customer. And we've got to make sure that we are easy to do business with. Next is product and solutions. We initially developed this awesome mass appealing product, gigabit internet, great, the masses took it, but we still have some unserved people left, and we've got to figure out what their specific needs are so that we can make sure that we bridge that digital divide and get internet into their homes as well. So we will be doing some work around creating needs-based solutions. Next is the network. Of course, it continues to be really important. We've built it for the most part, done a terrific job, but now we've got to make sure that we sustain it and make sure it's very reliable. So very high level, you see customer, product, and network. That's really the focus of the new organization that we've pulled apart and established under my direction. The green boxes represent some new positions and some new skill sets that we're trying to hire into. Those are not all new headcount necessarily or FTEs, but instead those represent new skills that we're going to be transitioning some of our current employees into. So really when I think about the organization, I think it presents a wonderful opportunity for our employees, again, our #1 asset, and that is we're establishing new career paths. We're also aligning people's talent and interests with really the new jobs and capabilities we have to fill going forward. We're adding more bench strength. In some cases, we had one person that only knew how to do certain things. That was a very vulnerable place to be. So now we're doing a better job of adding some bench strength and removing those single points of failure that we had organizationally. And we're also making sure that we've got single points of accountability and ownership. So I want to go through the network, the customer, and the product real quickly. Network focus has really been the key. Right now, I'm trying to say network is still a focus, but let's think about the network as a foundation rather than our focus going forward. Our focus going forward has to be the residents and the community. So the goal is to continue from a network perspective to provide reliable service. The great news is we're doing a terrific job of doing that. We have a highly, highly reliable network at 99.99% uptime. So that's something that the team should be really proud of. Furthermore, when we look at our utilization reports across the network, we have plenty of headroom. That's a good thing. We have, just like I mentioned, a few small areas where we've got to go enhance some capacity. And then second, we look at customer utilization reports. The good news is the customers aren't running into speed issues and can download their movies in 30 seconds flat. So really good indications overall. We're at about 83% enabled of all the premises in the community, and we hope to get to about 95% probably in the next 6 to 12 months. We've got that remaining brownfield work of existing areas, but then we also have a lot of new greenfield projects coming up. So we're going to focus on continuing to build out where we need to, and then we're going to really start and going back where we've already built, make sure we have capacity for everyone, and that we've got fiber to every single home. We're going to make sure that we're doing the rehab and maintenance so that our network will be very sustainable into perpetuity. And then we're also making sure that we have diverse routes for the long haul back to the internet pops so that if we have a major fiber cut between here and Denver, that's okay. That will not knock us down. We won't have that single point of failure in the network. And we're also making sure that we work with diverse carriers should there ever be an issue with a particular carrier. So these are just real high level, some views of some of the recent work that we've done turning up new premises. So on the upper left hand, we've turned those up in the last few months. Those upcoming greenfield opportunities, that's another 1,500 households and businesses we'll be enabling. And then we've got some brownfields, some MDUs or apartments we have yet to service. So we're turning those up in the next 6 months as well. So overall, that's about 2,800 new units we will have turned up. So now quickly on the marketing and product side, I already mentioned that it's really important that we understand those sub-segments within our community. We've hit the masses. Now we need to go and see if there's some special things that we need to be doing from a product and solutions perspective to address, parts of the Hispanic market. For gamers, do we need to add, do a 10 gig offer for the gamers with the mayor likes that, along with, perhaps a VPN network. Do we need to have a special offer for low income? That's something that our competition is doing. Fort Collins also has a $19.95 low income offer, so we'll be evaluating things like that. Seniors, we know that we don't penetrate the senior households and institutions, or not institutions, excuse me, living residences, so we have some opportunity there. And then with small businesses, I think we can do more to support them, and then nonprofits and startups. I'm not sure what the solutions are today, but I'm putting the organization in place to make sure we address that. And then we'll continue to seek partnerships, smart home, over-the-top video, to make sure that, again, we're providing solutions for our residents. And then we're going to be tweaking the brand to go along with the awesome new city brand that has been recently rolled out. So we will tweak, next slide, we will not change the name, but we will make sure that we fortify the logo to match with what the rest of the city is doing. We'll also probably be going away from broadband, speaking more about fiber and gig, because those are unique things that we can own. Anybody can do broadband, but not anybody can do fiber and gig. So we're going to take that, make that part of our tagline going forward. And then we're going to continue to work with the MDUs and developers in town to make sure that we are alongside them and supporting them with providing access. Customer focus, we got to be easy to do business with. What does that mean? It means online ordering capability. We'll be turning that up very soon so that you don't have to call us anymore. You can actually get online any time of day or night and sign up for service. We're adding a walk-in window so people that might not communicate as well over the phone are able to walk in and talk to a live body during the day. And we're going to look at doing some more after-hours support and improving our online phone IVR process as well. And then we're going to make sure we're talking to the residents and our prospective and existing customers. We really are here to serve them. We got to make sure that we're doing the qualitative and quantitative research to get their feedback. And then we're going to continue to strive for those really high customer satisfaction scores. We do all that, we increase our sales, reduce churn. Here's some results. I'm not going to cover these highly, but the story is sales are declining a little bit only because we're not as enabling as many households. We've built the preponderance of the network, so we're not doing as much work there. And the customer churn trend is very favorable. It's starting to trend down, even though it's a low number anyway. So we're just going to work to continue to promote sales. In the marketplace, we continue to dominate. I love this number. So we're 57% penetrated. What's cooler is that when you think about, there's some households that don't have internet, so when you change that denominator and you reduce it, and you realize, oh, well, only 77% of households really have internet, and so you do the new math, we're basically 74% penetrated of those households that have broadband internet. So that says a lot when you've got three very viable competitors in a marketplace and you've got 74% of that market. But we want to make that 100%. We want to make sure we have solutions for everyone. Data consumption continues to rise. 5G, it's coming. We're very aware of it and paying close attention, but we're not worried about it at this time. And it might even, present some unforeseen opportunities for revenue. And then you already mentioned that we've got, some peers in the marketplace. Fort Collins and Estes Park have recently turned up their offers to select areas of their cities, and Loveland and Boulder on the horizon as well. And then lastly, that's Harold's favorite word to hear me say, is from a financial performance perspective, it's all good news. We're hitting our revenue goals of that $15 million for 2019. And ARPU, that stands for average revenue per unit. That is a number that's going up. It's roughly $53 per customer, and it's going to continue to climb as we roll out new services and we get even more customers on the 1 meg, and we sell more into the businesses, which pay a little bit more revenue because they get different services. So that's all good news. We're underrunning our expenses, and so we're on track to pay back the bond as appropriate for 2029. So it's a good news story, and we're really excited. So thank you for allowing me the time to share our story. Thank you.
All right, thank you. How about you come get your picture with us?
Oh, yes.
All right, great. Harold, why don't you come up too on this one? All right, let's move on to, yes, public invited to be heard. So we've got a short list tonight. So I would remind you, or everyone who's speaking at public invited to be heard, it's a 3-minute limit. Say what you will, and then be gone, I guess, yeah.
Mayor,
Yeah,
we have 2 additions. I just want to let you know.
all right, perfect.
Since Michael Belmont and Strider Benston.
Perfect.
Thank you.
Okay. All right, Jason Martinez, you're first. If you could come up, and everybody, if you could say your name and address for the record, that'd be great.
Okay, hello again, Mayor Bagley, council members. My name is Jason Martinez, 1625 Otis Drive. I'm here again to spread the information about our non-for-profit organization, Combat Veterans Motorcycle Association. I want to share a little more information as well as make the request for citizens of Longmont who have any deployed service members to contact me and help us out with a project that we're doing. This year we had our 5th annual fall poker run where we raised funds to support our organization's auxiliary members, which are the spouses of the combat members or the combat veterans or the full members of our organization. Those funds will then, 100% of those funds are turned over to them to be used to assemble and send troop boxes or care packages overseas to deployed service members. So that's already been done. Our next meeting is November 17th. And what we're going to be doing, or we're requesting now, is anybody who has contact of any deployed service members, please go ahead and feel free to contact me directly. My email address is token@cvma3-6.org. That's TOKEN at cvma3-6.org. Again, we're a nonprofit organization. We're veterans helping veterans, and our mission is to make sure that our service members and our veterans don't go through the holiday season without some kind of support from home from others besides their family members, especially if there's any deployed service members who don't have anybody who sends stuff over. These service members don't have to be from Longmont. This truly is anybody and anybody anywhere in the U.S. that you guys have any access to through the city of Longmont. So I plan on being here a few more times before November 17th. So council members, you'll see me again. And City of Longmont, please feel free to contact me. And if you've got any questions, I'd be more than happy to provide answers for you.
Great. Thank you, Mr.
Perfect.
Martinez.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. All right, Elise Champ, or Champy? Okay. Ruby Bowman, I noticed you're on the list now and later. Ruby, are you going to speak now or wait for the, okay. Mr. Michael Belmont. Okay. Mr. Strider Benston, he's in the house.
Greetings, Mayor and Council. I think Michael just left because, anyway, he's going over to De Los Muertos, where I just came from. They're dancing right now, so at least we got both ends of it over at the Senior Center. Strider Benston, 951 17th Avenue. I came in, I hear you talking about Nextlight, and some of you know that us trailer trash are not allowed to use the services we've been paying for since 1998. We're actively and violently discriminated against. It's public bribery by the legal system, the management of trailer parks, and probably a lot of apartment buildings also. One of the Comcast or Direct, they pay off the management and then they don't allow us to have the internet that belongs to us. So the other thing, Al Presidente just gave 20% of Syria to Erdogan and Putin, to Turkey and Russia, and they are right now today dividing up the country. Turkey wants to kill them all, and Russia doesn't care what they do, and we just pulled out to allow the Kurds to be ethnically cleansed, vacated, or massacred, whatever. And that's what we have in our government right now. And El Presidente said he was being lynched because he has supported the Ku Klux Klan and every ilk of racism in this country, and actively said, Charlottesville, it was nice people over there in 17. But he talked about lynching, and his number one spokesman now, Lindsey Graham, senator from South Carolina, who knows what lynching is because his team has done it, tried to justify it by saying, oh, it's just a general term, it doesn't have any meaning. Well, I have been taken out in those cars at 2 o'clock in the morning with the 45 stuck in my ribs, and so I kind of know the idea. But for the person who calls himself the leader of the country to claim that he has been lynched because the United States Constitution stands against what he is doing, it's horrendous.
All right,
Thank you.
Thank you, Strider. All right, that will close. First call, public invited to be heard. We will have an opportunity at the end if you want to stick around. All right, let's move on to the consent agenda and introduction or reading by title of first reading ordinances. Don, can you do that for us, please?
You bet. Item 8A is ordinance 2019-63, a bill for an ordinance making additional appropriations for expenses and liabilities of the city of Longmont for the fiscal year beginning January 1, 2019. Public hearing and second reading scheduled for November 12, 2019. 8B is ordinance 2019-64, a bill for an ordinance amending Title 14, Chapter 14.04 of the Longmont Municipal Code on the water, utility, and wells. Public hearing and second reading scheduled for December 3rd, 2019. Item 8C is ordinance 2019-65, a bill for an ordinance amending Title 14.32 of the Longmont Municipal Code on rates and regulations governing electric service. Public hearing and second reading scheduled for December 3rd, 2019. 8D is resolution 2019-108, a resolution amending the financial policies of the city of Longmont for 2020. 8E is resolution 2019-109, a resolution of the Longmont City Council supporting an application for WaterSmart grant funding. 8F is resolution 2019-110, a resolution of the Longmont City Council approving the intergovernmental agreement between the city and St. Vrain Valley School District RE1J for a joint school resource officer program. 8G is resolution 2019-111, a resolution of the Longmont City Council approving the business lease between the city and Dennis L. Blumker and Karen A. Blumker for 500 Kimbark Street, Suite 101. 8H is resolution 2019-112, a resolution of the Longmont City Council approving the intergovernmental agreement for demand-side management and distributed energy resource partnership between the city of Longmont, the town of Estes Park, the city of Fort Collins, the city of Loveland, and Platte River Power Authority. 8I is accept the Main Street Corridor Plan. And Mayor, staff would like to remove item 8H and bring it back at a future date.
Okay, we have a motion? Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem.
I would like to pull
Mike.
item
Mike.
number D,
Let's go ahead and pull item number D.
and the city, I believe, is pulling item H.
It's H is no longer on the agenda.
They removed it.
We removed it. So we'll go ahead. Do we have a motion for the consent agenda? Less item D?
So moved.
All right, the consent agenda has been moved, less D. Do we have a second? It's been seconded by Councilmember Martin. Let's go ahead and vote. All right, that passes unanimously. All right, let's move on to ordinances on second reading and public hearings on the matters of 9A, ordinance 2019-57 through ordinance 2019-61. These are 2020 budget ordinances. So 9A1, ordinance 2019-57 is a bill for an ordinance amending Title IV of the Longmont Municipal Code on revenue and finance by creating the Sustainability Fund. Let's go ahead. Are there any questions from council? Let's go ahead and open it up for public hearing. Is there anyone here who would like to speak on ordinance 2019-57? All right, seeing none, let's go ahead and close. Do we have a motion? Mayor Pro Tem.
I would move ordinance 2019-57.
All right, it's been moved by the Mayor Pro Tem. It's been seconded by Councilmember Martin. Let's vote. All right, it passes unanimously. Ordinance 2019-58, a bill for an ordinance fixing and levying taxes upon the real and personal property within the city of Longmont for the year 2019 to pay budgeted city expenses for the 2020 fiscal year. Are there any questions from council? All right, seeing none, let's go ahead and open it up for public hearing. Anyone want to say anything? All right, seeing none, let's go ahead and close it. Councilmember Peck. All right, Councilmember Peck has moved ordinance 2019-58. Do we have a second?
Second.
It's been seconded by Mayor Pro Tem. Let's vote. All right, that passes unanimously. Ordinance 2019-59, a bill for an ordinance fixing and levying taxes upon the real and personal property within the Longmont Downtown Development District for the year 2019 to pay budgeted expenses to the Longmont Downtown Development Authority for the 2020 fiscal year. Are there any questions from council? Councilmember Martin? Okay. All right, good. Well, I'll get you right there, though. I'll get you, council member. All right. Are there anyone here who let's go ahead and open it for public hearing. Anybody want to come speak? All right. Seeing none, let's go ahead and close the public hearing. Councilmember Martin.
I move adoption of. I don't have my glasses on. I'm sorry. Pardon me. Thank you. Of ordinance 2019-59.
All right, that has been moved and it was seconded by Councilmember Finley, also by Mayor Pro Tem, but we just need one. So let's go ahead and vote. All right, that passes unanimously. All right, ordinance 2019-60, a bill for an ordinance adopting the budget for the city of Longmont for the year 2020. This is a big one. All right, any questions or comments from council? All right, we'll go ahead and open this up for public hearing. Anyone here want to come speak on the budget? Good stuff, Ms. Davis. No? All right. Okay, we're going to go ahead and close the public hearing. Can we have a motion, please? Councilmember Finley.
I move passage of ordinance 2019-60.
All right, that was moved by Councilmember Finley. It was seconded by Councilmember Waters. Let's vote. All right, that passes unanimously. Ordinance 2019-61, a bill for an ordinance making appropriations for the expenses and liabilities of the city of Longmont for the fiscal year beginning January 1st, 2020. Mayor Pro Tem? Okay. Any other questions from council? All right, seeing none, let's go ahead and open it up for public hearing. Anyone? Next light, anything to add? No? Want more money in the budget? Now's the time. Okay. Let's go ahead and close the public hearing. And Mayor Pro Tem.
I move ordinance 2019-61.
I'll second that. All right, it's been moved and seconded. Let's vote. All right, that passes unanimously. Let's go on to 9B, ordinance 2019-62, a bill for an ordinance amending Title 15 of the Land Development Code to adopt review criteria and define a sustainability evaluation system. To start, are there any questions from council? Mayor Pro Tem.
It was brought to my attention that there's some confusion about what this would apply to. I was under the impression, several of us were under the impression that this would apply to any new development along the river. But some people think that it only applies to someone requesting a waiver. So I would like to know.
Good evening, Mayor Bagley, members of council, Don Burchett, Planning and Development Services. So this ordinance does three things. The first is establish review criteria, and then it talks about a couple of other things. But to answer your question, Mayor Pro Tem, the way that this is written currently with this first step that we're taking of getting this into the land development code is that this would require that anybody that is going to need variance to the 150-foot setback would have to be evaluated through the SES system. And then the next step for us is working now on the items that were in the Wildlife Master Plan update with the recommendations for the changes for the review criteria for those, looking at what is considered to be adjacent and what are going to be the rules that people have to meet if they are adjacent to the riparian areas. And so this is the first step. This is getting it into code so that the SES is a requirement for anybody that wants to get a variance for development within that 150 feet.
Well, there's likely to be quite a bit of time lag, and in the meantime, there's likely to be quite a lot of development that isn't going to be evaluated at all, except by people who want a variance. In other words, nothing will be evaluated about the drainage, about a whole variety of things.
Mayor Bagley, Mayor Pro Tem Christensen, so the land development code regulations and the city's design standards, as well as other regulations that we have to adhere to, already look at drainage regulations and other things pertaining to development. So whether an SES system is adopted by this council or not, we still have minimum standards that we have to meet and make sure are met before we approve development.
Okay, thank you for explaining that.
Dr. Waters.
Thanks, Mayor Bagley. I think we ought to be vigilant in terms of where this gets applied. From my perspective, when we talked about this last time, a couple of observations. One, getting it codified means that this council gets to establish the requirement that anything that's going to be proposed along the corridor, at least within the setback at this point, has to be evaluated by the SES. We also know that anything that is going to require a variance has to come to us under any circumstance, right? My biggest concern that if we delay, I don't know what to expect with this election cycle. I just would like to know that the next council has to go through 2 readings before they can undo this. And I think there's more work to be done. I don't think, I know there's more work to be done. There's questions about nexus and, you know, the tests we have to meet legally so that we don't lose, right, if somebody challenges this. So I think we have to be very thoughtful. I think we ought to start small and get smart. If we're going to make mistakes, make them small and make them early. But I've said from the beginning, for me, this is a place to start, not a place to end. So going forward, getting it codified is important. Getting it right is better than, in terms of the substance and the technology, the technical aspects of it is more important to me. Getting it right is more important than getting it done tonight or, you know, within although that said, you don't get a pass to keep, you know, this doesn't get slow walked, right? Mm-hmm. But I think getting it codified is what's most important, with an understanding that this is not going away, and we're going to hold staff accountable for bringing us back the instrument, what we need to do in terms of nexus, in terms of a legal requirement, and holding the development community accountable for making certain that they are committed, like we are, to a triple bottom line for new development.
Mayor, if I could, just so that everybody knows, so our outside legal counsel, as well as Clarion, has had the tool for about 3 weeks now. We've asked them to respond to us this week with their edits and comments. And then staff is going to be proceeding with trying to, what we would say, kind of adjusting the tool by running through some of the prior projects that had received variances through our past system and rating them to kind of see what that looks like under this system. We're planning to come back to you in November on one of the meetings that were coming up so that we can educate any new people who are on the board or the council at that time, and then also start walking you through the processes that we still have to finish up so that we can make progress and get this adopted.
Okay, Councilmember Martin?
Thank you, Mayor Bagley. Mr. Burchett, a wildlife survey has to happen for any new land use permitting. And am I correct in thinking that even if an application is for a parcel that is merely adjacent to the 150-foot setback, that wildlife survey would happen and would include the riparian species inside the setback or not?
Mayor Bagley, Councilmember Martin, so our code, we have the ability to require those, and typically what we do is we depend on the information that we've been given through our natural resources folks, for example, to help us identify when those reports are needed. So if it was directly adjacent to the riparian area or a property that was undeveloped, then we would want to get one of those to determine whether or not there were any species either on or adjacent to the property that could be impacted. But I can tell you it is not always on a redevelopment, for example, property that we get one of those if we do not know of anything that is in the area that could be impacted by development. But that's not to say that during our review, if we identify that there's a need for one of those reports, then we request it. But it's not always every development must turn in one. We try to make sure that we identify and require that report when it's needed and it's based on the information that we've been given.
I'll have a quick hypothetical, or actually it's not a hypothetical, it's an analogy. In my ward, I have some residents who were wildlife photographers, and in a parcel adjacent to them that was undeveloped, that was being developed, they knew about some wildlife and they notified the city about that.
Mm-hmm.
Would that process also work here, even if there's no variance, just if there's an application?
So just to make sure, so that's where if we hadn't asked for a report, we would require one. Under the SES, if you're talking about this SES evaluation system, currently the way it would work is it would only get evaluated through the SES if it was in one of those 4 water bodies, 150-foot riparian setback area. That's when the SES would be applied. So
yes, I'm actually not asking about the SES,
okay.
But rather I'm trying to address the concerns of the public who are saying we need to apply it to everything right away. And I'm asking if a member of the public requests that a permit get a wildlife evaluation, would that then happen? Or
so we would, so as an
check
example,
into it?
we've had people who have called us before and said that they have seen owls on a property, and then
Yes.
we've asked them to go out and look and update that. We've also sent our staff, our natural resources folks, and asked them to go out. And in one case recently, I hired our third-party consultant to go out and to evaluate the property to make sure that, you know, this is kind of the definitive answer, and there was nothing that was found on a property that was in question. So we do look into those. And
Okay.
if we find evidence that there needs to be additional research done because the animal or the bird is there or something, then yes, we will.
right. So the current limited use of the SES doesn't prevent, for example, the rare fish
No.
species or something from being protected.
It
Thank
does
you.
not.
All right, Councilmember Peck.
Thank you, Mayor Bagley. So, Don, just for clarification, right now, properties that are for development or redevelopment that are adjacent to the corridor, the developer has to do an SES review, and then staff does that as well? Or is this for all properties that are adjacent to the corridor? Or
Great question. So just to be clear, so what would happen is that if a property, let's say, is going to be redeveloped, an existing property, we know that they are next to or near the river, let's just say St. Vrain.
mm-hmm.
Then what we will ask them for is for their consultant to determine where that riparian boundary is, which then our staff will confirm. That's where we try to depend on natural resources to help us confirm that that boundary line is where they say it is. And then we measure the 150 foot from that line. So it could be from the center line of the river, it could be a couple 100 feet away. If development occurs within that 150 foot setback, they would have to get a variance and they would have to fill out that form and submit that to us, the SES. That's when we will look at that, but we will do our own evaluation of that. And that's what you will see. It's similar to when if Councilmember Rodriguez probably knows this better than some of you on this board, but for Planning Commission, we ask that the applicants address the review criteria in our code. Staff also does our own. We may not agree with them on the way that we do our evaluation, and that's not going to surprise me that the SES that's filled out by a property owner or by a consultant might be different than the way that the staff has reviewed it and approved it. But the expectation is that you will get our evaluation so you can see it, but I think you would also want to see what the applicant had submitted to kind of draw your own conclusions and determine whether or not you felt that that was accurate or not.
And that would come back to council.
Correct, because it would need a variance, and so you would have to be the review body and approve it with a recommendation from Planning Commission.
Is that to all development properties adjacent to the?
Again, it's only if the development is going to have any development occurring within the 150 foot setback.
Only if they want a variance.
That's right. That's right.
All right, nobody else is in here, so let's go ahead and open it up for our, when I say in here, it means in the queue. So let's go ahead and open it up for our public hearing. Ruby Bowman?
Mayor Bagley, council members, Ruby Bowman, 1512 Left Hand Drive. The proposed draft ordinance is not good enough. It needs to be amended. There are a number of reasons why the city of Longmont should ensure the protection of the St. Vrain Creek by requiring an SES review of all properties adjacent to the creek. The importance of St. Vrain Creek has been recognized by county and state scientists, as well as research completed for a graduate thesis on ecology. One, the St. Vrain Creek is of statewide importance for native fish conservation. CPW stated in a letter to Longmont that the city reach of the St. Vrain has immense aquatic conservation value to the state of Colorado because of the rare native fish inhabiting the river, some of which are glacial relics. These glacial relics represent genetically unique population segments. Two, the St. Vrain corridor is designated as critical wildlife habitat and an important riparian habitat connector in the environmental resources element of the Boulder County Comprehensive Plan. Three, riparian areas support greater numbers of species than other habitat types, that is, greater than 90% of regional biodiversity, and comprise less than 2% of the land cover in Colorado's Front Range. This is from Boulder County Parks and Open Space. Four, transition zone streams like the St. Vrain are heavily impacted by many effects of urban development and are among the most imperiled of aquatic habitats in Colorado, according to the Colorado State Wildlife Action Plan. And five, when compared to other major Front Range streams, the St. Vrain contains disproportionately high number of native fish species, including Colorado species of special concern, such as stone cats. It is imperative that you require SES review using the three-prong approach, particularly focusing on the environmental aspect, to be completed for all development projects adjacent to St. Vrain Creek. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Bowman. All right, Councilmember Peck?
You know, this is really important to me too, so I'm going to make a motion.
Right, let's go ahead and close. Let me just.
Yes,
Yep,
yes,
no,
yes.
don't turn it off. Don't turn it off. Anybody else? Is Sherry Malloy? Sorry, Councilmember Peck.
Good evening, Mayor Bagley and members of City Council. Sherry Malloy, 2113 Rangeview Lane. As Ruby said, item 9B needs to be amended to require the SES be used to assess any and all development applications adjacent to St. Frank Creek.
Sorry.
That's okay.
Go ahead, I'll start you over.
Oh, no, I'll go on. 2 weeks ago, at a candidates forum at Oscar Blues, the three of you who are running for re-election all indicated that you are about protecting the St. Vrain and other riparian areas from encroaching development. Tonight, you have an opportunity to do so by making good policy. When Councilman Waters first suggested this SES tool be developed, it was for any and all development applications throughout the city. Now it's been whittled down to only being applied to variance from the conservation setbacks. That's a very, very narrow application to a good tool that holds promise of improving development by using a three-pronged approach of evaluating proposals according to economic impacts, social impacts, and environmental impacts. Please don't sell us short. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Oh, okay, so now there's nobody. Now there's nobody else in the queue. I'll get right there to you. And there's nobody out there. Oh, sorry, Mr. Benston, come on up. You're still in the queue, John.
Yeah, thank you. Strider Benston, 951 17th. I didn't prepare for this like our two previous speakers, but this is so critical, and everybody knows that the infrastructure of our country is being destroyed from the White House, and especially environment and all forms of nature and rights and stuff. So the only chance we have is to build it up from here. And there was just a thing today on TV, 94% of all the salmon in the Columbia River have already been exterminated. And grizzly bears and polar bears are now reuniting. They've been separate for about 200,000 years. And now since the polar bears are being exterminated, they're coming south, and bears are starving because there's not much food left. The birds aren't, in the skies. You don't have to wipe the windshields of the insects anymore. This is really crucial, and I didn't know the variance thing is involved. The 150 feet makes sense, but still you got, what is the impact? Sound pollution, light pollution, industrial pollution, chemical pollution, traffic, all of that stuff involved. And I think the studies have been pretty good, but they need to take into account these other factors, which we have seen in the past. And I remember almost all of my life, but lately I've had a lot of injuries. I haven't climbed trees very much lately, but I used to climb trees all the time, and I can feel trees missing the actual contact and feel of large animals, which have almost all been exterminated on the planet, cougars and bears and whatever, by our hunting, our genocide, ecocide. Let's do everything we can, and I don't think it's unreasonable to have the amendment to cover all adjacent properties. And other than that, I think we're doing good work on trying to get a foundation here. Thank you much.
Thank you, Strider. All right, Councilmember Peck. Actually, we'll now conclude, unless there's nobody else, we'll now conclude the public hearing. Okay, it's concluded. Councilmember Peck?
Okay, again, it's important to me, so I move that we direct staff to amend the SES ordinance, extending the SES review to all development properties adjacent to the creek.
I guess the creek. Could you define that?
The St. Vrain corridor.
I guess.
All riparian areas.
That's what I was,
Okay.
trying to push you for.
Extending the SES review to all riparian areas adjacent, no, to all development adjacent to the riparian areas.
Right. So I guess my question is, we already passed, I mean. if
This
I-
is an amendment, though.
Right? No, what I mean is that, I guess my question for staff was, we instructed staff to move forward with that at one point, right? 150 feet for all riparian areas, Left-Hand Creek, Oligarchy Ditch, right?
So there's multiple pieces to this. So
Right.
this piece is related to the variance that's already on the books.
Right.
You have the wildlife management plan, which has different components in terms of those setbacks, and you have different issues related to the properties along some of those other water bodies, or those other creeks. And so what this was doing, the intent of this was to come in on the variance piece first. Then in November, we had a meeting scheduled to start moving through the other issues that we talked about, because you have different components that start coming into play in terms of use by right, nexus, that are more involved.
So will we have a similar process with these other areas along the waterways?
Correct. That's what's coming in November to
Okay.
start that next layer of the conversation.
All right. Councilmember Waters? I'm sorry, Joan, did you have anything else?
Well, because we're having these other areas come up later, can my amendment, when we are discussing these other areas, be applied when you are bringing those back as part of those other areas that you're bringing back, to have this be the discussion that those adjacent properties?
Correct. The next piece, I'm waiting for Joni, but the next piece is really to get into the adjacency question. Correct, Joni?
Mayor Bagley, members of council, Joni Marsh with Planning and Development Services. So yes, the next step on November 19th, we'll be back before you talking about not just the St. Vrain Creek, but all of the other waterways that were recommended in the Wildlife and Habitat Plan to add to the code and to have restrictions. And so we want to walk through each of those additional waterways, show you what the adjacent properties would look like, because there will be many new properties that will basically be added with additional zoning criteria that is not currently in existence. We also don't actually have a definition of riparian adjacent at this point. We talked about that at 2 of our previous meetings, but didn't end up getting from council the direction around what that definition is. I believe at one point council talked about going out as far as 500 feet for that adjacency, but I don't believe that we got our feedback on what that number would look like to apply the SES tool beyond the 150-foot variance. And that's what we would like to start doing on the 19th.
So the first way I made it was correct then, not riparian areas, but to the St. Vrain Creek, to all properties adjacent to the St. Vrain Creek. That would, or St. Vrain River, however you want to define that, since that is what this draft is pertaining to. Is that correct?
Mayor Bagley and Councilmember Peck. So this draft actually applies to the current waterways which are in the code. And if you look in your packet, you'll see the 4 that it applies to in current code. This will then say that if you are requesting a variance to the 150-foot setback from any of those 4 or 5 waterways listed currently, you have to make a finding that it meets the criteria, which will involve using the SES tool, as Don described it, as part of your decision making. So that's, I think, the St. Vrain, Left Hand, Union, and Dry Creek number 2. So those are the ones this is going to apply to. So it's not everything adjacent to the St. Vrain Creek.
So it'd be everything adjacent to those 4 waterways that you just mentioned.
It would be everything that would require a variance to the 150-foot setback from all 4 of those waterways.
So accepting this draft, this is just about the variance then?
Correct. At this point, I think Councilmember Waters' point was well taken, that this is the first step in codifying that we're going to use the tool, we're going to calibrate it, come back to you. But this is a way to say we're going to start using this tool immediately when we have those variance requests.
Okay.
And staff would be hopeful that in very quick order, we could then walk through the wildlife management plan recommendations that you voted on, talk about those, see which waterways we want to add, what the effect on adjacent properties would be, and then get those added along with a definition of adjacency
Okay.
to the next ordinance.
Okay,
That
then
would
I
be our
remove my
approach.
motion. Thank you, Joni.
All right, Councilmember Rodriguez. Special guest appearance. No, just kidding.
Thank you, Mayor Bagley. I was generally going to address the motion on the table, but since it's been removed, I would just like to say I appreciate what Councilmember Waters was talking about as far as expediency is concerned. I do have a different perspective on the calculus of vote counting in this circumstance, as one candidate up for re-election who's running unopposed has been a vocal champion of the SES system. So I don't think the expediency is that dire of a need. Knowing that the 3 members who are not currently up for election have voted for it in the past and likely would probably do so again. So I would have been in support of Councilmember Peck's motion and maybe with a friendly, more prescriptive amendment as to contiguity versus adjacency. So I guess I move to amend that all properties directly contiguous to the riparian corridors be under the SES system, as opposed to just those applying for variances.
All right, Dr. Martin. Doc Martin. Yes, no, Councilmember Martin.
Thank you. I wanted to come at what Joni was saying another way and get her to verify my way of putting it. The last time we discussed this, we were in executive session because we were getting legal advice about the intersection of this process with the land use code. Is that accurate?
Mayor Bagley and Councilmember Martin, correct. As we make new zoning regulations, we were looking at the rough proportionality and the nexus to making basically new rules that we're going to impose on a number of properties where those rules don't currently exist.
Okay. And then the second part is, I believe, considering that the 2 offered amendments essentially have the same sense, which is to broaden the application of the SES, that the stepwise process has a couple of purposes. One is to get experience with the use of the tool and what the outcomes are. 2 is to resolve some of those unresolved questions, but that ultimately the intent, when those questions are answered and those processes are and the tool are refined, is exactly the outcome that's being asked for. Is that also correct?
Councilmember Martin, yes, that's correct. And I think there are a few other pieces that we just need to talk to council about as we add waterways. What are those other adjacent or contiguous properties, as Councilmember Rodriguez talked about, for the 4 or 5 waterways that the Wildlife Management Plan recommended adding? So I think those are new, and those would certainly be something that we want to look at what those maps tell us, and also make sure that adjacent property owners who may not be aware of that have some ability to understand what that means, because some of those are going to be existing homes. They're not going to be necessarily development properties like you see along the St. Vrain.
Right, so there's a question of, if I want to build an ADU, how do we apply the SES if I'm already there? Yeah, okay. So just to sum up, there are some unanswered questions, both of law and of process, but the intention is to get where everybody wants to go with this.
That's a great summary, yes. Thank you, Marcia.
Thank you.
Councilmember Waters.
Thanks, Mayor Bagley. The issue that we're going to now focus on, I think, is one of the level of urgency we feel, and pace kind of set down next to intent. And if I were to dial back, it was 13 months ago or so, the motion was made to give direction to staff. It was on January 22nd that we reviewed a timeline that was laid out where we had to hit certain marks, benchmarks of development and work that the staff had to do to get us to a point where we could make a decision with the kind of confidence that we had the technical aspects right to craft the kind of policy that we'd like to adopt. In June, when there was discussion about a timeout, or this was like May in development, it was because we were not getting this done because there was too much on the plate for staff. So we backed away from that, understanding it was unlikely that the sequence was supposed to be, we get the SES right, we could roll that up into the management plan, or vice versa. I think it was the SES, then the management plan, then the amendments to the land code, right? That was the sequence. So we rolled up the content into a policy that reflected all the good work in the staff's doing with the SES and with the wildlife management plan. But we're out of sync. We got the wildlife management before this. Now we need to embed into the wildlife management plan what comes out of this. I mean, we're out of sync to get it right. So here's the question. I'm going to ask the question of Councilman Rodriguez. Since we heard a lot about Nexus and the consequences if we make a mistake, what the costs are financially and what the cost will be to what we're trying to do here with a policy, that it could blow up on us. How confident are you that we've learned enough, we know enough about how to establish Nexus, that if we broaden this without testing at all, that we're not putting the city at risk financially and legally? Because if we vote on this motion, it seems to me that's exactly what we're doing. We're all having the same intent. We potentially have a chance to shoot ourselves in the foot if we get this wrong. So that's a question I'd like some answer to. Since we've heard from our council, that's a critical part of getting this right. That we're clear on what the nexus is, we can defend it, because if we don't, this goes right to federal court and the city's on the hook financially.
Nobody's in the queue. I personally agree with the sentiments that the motion originally brought up, Councilmember Peck. I think we should vote for this without the amendment, without amendments, because this is only dealing with the 150-foot setback variance issue. And then let staff come back dealing with the use by right issue, which is huge. And then we act on exactly the issues that we're talking about. Because the things that we haven't discussed, I mean, you mentioned the word contiguous, but we had 150 feet from the riparian corridor, but then we had adjacent. We have several things right now that we don't know. I'd rather take this step and then go right into the second step. That's just my thought. Councilman Rodriguez.
Thank you, Mayor Bagley. Just to address some of the concerns Councilmember Waters raised. First of all, I believe in my interpretation of the same meeting along Nexus that environmental protections were allowed within Nexus. And so to me, this falls within that range, because I think that larger conversation was about scaling up to all development. And it was my interpretation again that this fell within the Nexus along with, say, public-private partnerships, which we've talked about as well. And so I don't think this, and also it's not an implied regulatory taking to institute a sustainability evaluation system. I think that's where the liability comes from, is when you start dealing with proposed regulatory takings, not as an evaluation system. In and of itself is not, I think, legally too promiscuous for a council to consider. So that would be my answer to your questions.
Mayor Pro Tem.
I agree with what Councilman Rodriguez just said. My interpretation from that meeting was that we were being given, rather than looking at Fort Collins, which is a town that's very similar to us and has been using a sustainability system for quite some time, and I don't believe they've ever been sued. Perhaps I'm wrong. Am I wrong, Attorney May?
Fort Collins does not use it for for private development. They only use it for their public projects. Is that correct?
Okay, all right. Well, the example that we were given was a town in Nevada just outside of Las Vegas, and they basically really seem to only be trying to figure out whether something's economically encouraging. So I did not find that very convincing, that argument very convincing. Anyway, I still think that we really need to apply this to all development along riparian borders, riparian areas.
Dr. Waters.
I just want to I will go back to the takings conversation. If there's property where there's use by right, and we've applied the tool, and I want to be able to apply the tool and defend it, and it's considered by the property owner as a taking, and the courts decide that it's a taking, we're in big trouble. Do we know enough? This is probably not a fair question to ask Eugene, so I'll just ask council members. Do we know enough about the criteria for what constitutes a taking, and enough about the specifics of the instrument, not just on the environmental leg, but the other two legs, to know that we know enough to not get us into that legal dispute and potentially risk the whole effort here? I just don't get why we would want to accelerate it at the risk of losing it at great expense. So if we know enough about what constitutes a taking, and somebody can explain that to me and why we can defend this, if we tell somebody what they can't do on their property without it being a taking, I'm all ears.
There's people in the queue, but I'm just going to ask a question, and it's a question that and it's been on my brain because I've been talking about it in forums, on social media, etc. My question is, why so often do we have first readings and we're all on the same page and we instruct staff to move forward, and then we come back to second readings and all of a sudden it seems like we're on a whole different page? And I've got my own theories on that, but I find it frustrating. Councilmember Finley.
Thank you, Mayor Bagley. I think we really need to, in order to do this right, when we come back and look at all the different areas we're adding to our riparian areas, all the different waterways and the land adjacent to those waterways, what is use by right and what kind of trouble we could get into, then you can make a determination. I don't think you can really, until you actually look at each area separately and determine what kind of issues we're going to have, it would be reckless to go forward without doing that.
Councilmember Martin.
This is my last question, I promise. It seems to me that we have two things to decide. There is which set of projects we score using this tool, and then based on a score that we get for each application, what do we do with that score? In the case of a request for a variance, it's easy. If the score is high enough, we grant the variance. If the score is not high enough, we have a very concrete and defensible reason for not granting the variance, and we know that we're within our rights to not grant any variance. Right? So we're good on that. But then the question is, as you get farther and farther away from that cut and dried case of a variance request, then it becomes less and less clear how you go about acting on the score. And I believe that in my understanding, the staff is asking to learn more about the tool And, you know, we may find that we don't encounter any conflicts between the score and the action that we recommend as we go forward. A question that I want to ask Joni is, on these adjacent properties, will you compute the score anyway, even though there isn't anything available in the approved processes yet to do with the score, and essentially accumulate a body of knowledge about how the tool is working?
Mayor Bagley and Councilmember Martin. So that's a good question. So as Don noted, we are looking to take the feedback from our outside counsel about the tool as it currently is written, which is at this point, for the purpose of nexus and rough proportionality, heavily weighted to the environmental side, so that as we look at things within the riparian setback, we're making sure we're getting the highest score in the riparian section. What we're going to do first is take a look at existing and past projects to see how they score, to try to calibrate what those projects are scoring and how they look, so that we can see if we have any outliers that we need to reconsider, be it from our environmental services, natural resources, staff, storm drainage. We have a lot of criteria to get through. And then I think the point would be to come back to council and say, where else do you want us to apply it? So if you would like us to take it and use it for all applications going forward, that's certainly something council could direct. If you'd like us to do it just for contiguous or adjacent parcels, that would be great. We didn't have any intent on testing it right now on every application, though.
Would that be a tremendous amount of work to do that? Is it a huge burden of work compared to, for example, the thing you said you were going to do, which is test it on retroactive permits? I'm not thinking up a motion. I'm just kind of trying to get an understanding of what the process of putting this into full production is, because I guess maybe a question I need to ask is, if there's not a variance, what are you going to do with the score? Are you going to actually deny permits even though there's no variance?
At this time, no. So nothing in the ordinance before you applies to every development application. So we won't be running the evaluation system as it presently is in this ordinance on every application. So we wouldn't be denying anything based on that unless, of course, it were in that riparian setback. The other question you pose is whether that is a burden to start reviewing and taking a look at it. I think once we actually get this tool in the next couple of weeks looked at and get back to you on the 19th, we may be able to answer that a little more clearly. And then we also have an FTE that's funded since the budget passed. I can say that out loud, right?
Yes.
And so we'll be working to hire that FTE to have someone start in January who's one of their primary job duties will be working with the SES and using this tool on development applications. So then I think we'll certainly have bandwidth to be looking at how we can do that across the board and do some more consideration on how we might apply it and score it. I think there's still some nebulousness to a hard number versus checking a box and some of that.
Thank you. I agree with that, and based on that, I regretfully have to agree with Councilmember Waters, and that I think we want to be able to apply this with confidence when we begin to apply it in each place. And I think the only place that right now that we have clarity and confidence is on the setbacks. I hope that this won't cause any damage, but I think that's the way we have to proceed.
So I think there's a motion on the table. There was a motion made by Joan, and then it was amended. It was amended and seconded. Did you? You made a separate motion. So do you want to repeat your motion, please, Councilmember Rodriguez?
Yes, the motion was to increase the scope of the SES to all properties directly contiguous to riparian areas as stated.
All right. So again, ruling of the chair, we could pass that and pass this ordinance because they're two separate issues, correct? Meaning, what we're doing is I believe the motion's not pertaining to the ordinance. Right, no, but, yeah, okay. Eugene?
A couple points of clarification. I heard the motion from Councilmember Rodriguez to apply the SAS to all properties contiguous to the St. Vrain. To the riparian
It
areas?
was all to the 4 riparian areas as noted by Planning Director Marsh.
Nobody's in the queue. I'm not going to vote for the motion, only because if no one else does it, I'm going to make a motion that we actually pass ordinance 2019-62 as written, and then we can reaffirm. We've already given direction to bring back essentially the exact same. I'd rather have this become law and then have the attorney's office and staff provide an ordinance other than on second reading and just on the fly. So I'm going to go ahead and call for a vote since nobody else is in there. So let's vote. Yes, council members, on Councilmember, although I think the motion's still unclear. Why don't you read what you captured? Thank you.
Councilmember Rodriguez moved to amend that all properties contiguous to riparian corridors be under the SES system as opposed to just those applying for variances. Councilmember Peck seconded.
That is the motion. Let us vote. All right, the motion fails 3-4 with council members Finley, myself, Councilmember Martin, and Councilmember Waters against. All right, nobody else is in the queue. I'm actually going to move ordinance 2019-62 as presented by staff. All right, let's vote. All right, that passes unanimously. Nobody's in the queue, but Councilmember Rodriguez, would you like to make a motion to direct staff to bring back an ordinance? No? Okay, yeah, so, I mean, we have consensus, I think. Everybody agrees that we don't need a vote, but look back at the tape and the motion and it's consensus. Or do you need a vote?
No, we're coming back on the 19th to work through the process.
Okay, all right. All right, let's move on to item 9D. Actually, you know what? Let's take a few minutes, if you don't mind. All right, great, thanks. All right, let's go ahead and start again. All right, let's go ahead with item 8D, and we're going to put Mayor Pro Tem in the queue. We're going to go on, you pulled 8D, didn't you?
Oh, yes.
Yes. You could tell us why?
I pulled it because, first of all, thank you. Yes, I just have a brief question. Under the Human Service Agency funding, I wanted to make it clear that $87,000 from the special marijuana tax, that's that's half of it, right?
One more time. Is it on now?
Yeah.
Mayor Bagley and Councilmember Christensen, I'm Teresa Malloy, Budget Manager. That is correct.
Okay.
That is from the half. That's not the full half, though.
No,
But that
I know.
is, so half of it is going to the Affordable Housing Fund.
Yes.
That's $137,000. The other half, $137,000, of that, $87,000 is for the Human Service Agency funding.
I thought we specifically voted that that was going to go into early childhood education.
And then there is some funding going to the early childhood education, correct?
What council voted on in direction was 80,000 into the Health and Human Service funding and 50,000 ongoing into the early childhood education.
Okay, thank you for clarifying that. And just a couple of comments. I was glad to see the living wage requirement added, thank you. And I really like the obsolete and surplus items. I'm going to try to apply that to my home, where things that haven't moved in 5 years need to be either recycled or sold or whatever, gotten rid of. Thank you.
Kind of like us council members. Get it? Get it? We're for, I know, it was over 5 years. That's what I mean. I was joking, as in like recycle us. All right. You want to make a motion, Mayor Pro Tem?
I move passage of Resolution 2019-108.
Second. It was moved by Mayor Pro Tem and seconded by Councilmember Rodriguez. Let's vote. All right, that passes unanimously. All right. Let's move on to general business. 11A, 2020 Longmont General Improvement District Budget Resolutions. Do I have a motion to recess as the Longmont City Council and convene as the Board of Directors of the Longmont General Improvement District Number 1? It's been moved by Councilmember Martin, seconded by Councilmember Finley. Let's vote. All right, that passes unanimously. Do I have a motion for, or actually, the next topic is Resolution LGID 2019-04, a resolution fixing and levying taxes on the real, and, oh, sorry, the motion passed. We are now, we have recessed and we now have convened as the Board of Directors of the Longmont General Improvement District Number 1. So Resolution LGID 2019-04, it's a resolution fixing and levying taxes on the real and personal property within the Longmont General Improvement District Number 1 for the year 2019 to pay budgeted expenses of the district for the 2020 fiscal year. Mayor Pro Tem?
I would move passage of RLGID 2019-04.
I'll second that. All right, it's been moved by Mayor Pro Tem. It was seconded by by Councilmember Martin. Is it you? Okay. Let's vote. All right, that passes unanimously. Let's move on to 11A3, Resolution LGID 2019-05, a resolution of the Board of Directors of the Longmont General Improvement District Number 1 adopting the annual budget for the district for the fiscal year 2020. Do we have a motion? All right, I would move Resolution LGID 2019-05. All right, it's been moved by myself. So it was seconded by Councilmember Finley. Let's vote. That passes unanimously. Do we have a motion to adjourn as the Board of Directors of the Longmont General Improvement District Number 1 and convene as the Board of Commissioners of the Longmont Urban Renewal Authority? All right, the motion, let's vote. Although it's going to pass unanimously. Calling the shot. Oh, it passes unanimously. We are now adjourned as the Board of Directors of the Longmont General Improvement District, and we have convened as the Board of Commissioners of the Longmont Urban Renewal Authority. Number 11B is the 2020 Longmont Urban Renewal Authority Resolution. In other words, RLURA 2019-01, which is a resolution of the Board of Commissioners of the Longmont Urban Renewal Authority adopting the annual budget for the authority for the fiscal year 2020. Do we have a motion? All right, it's been moved by Councilmember Finley, and it was seconded by Dr. Waters. So let's vote. That passes unanimously. Do I have a motion to adjourn as the Board of Commissioners of the Longmont Urban Renewal Authority and reconvene as the Longmont City Council? All right, it's been moved by Councilmember Martin, and it was seconded by Dr. Waters. Let's vote. And that passes unanimously. All right, let's move on to final call, public invited to be heard, because this steam thing, I don't know about that. Oh wait, Dr. Waters, is this important to you? You like this? Oh, all right, we'll stay a little longer, it's okay. All right, let's go on to number 11C, which is Building Steam Report, the St. Vrain River Corridor Visualization Process. And I was just giving you a hard time, Dr. Waters. I just wanted to rile you up, it's early still. All right, go ahead.
All right, Mayor Bagley, members of council, Sandy Cedar, Assistant City Manager, and I had the pleasure of working on this project with a few other very talented folks, including Aaron Fosdick, who is behind me, Marika Unger, who is back farther, and Tony Chacon, who is somewhere. There we go, in the back. As well as with Harold and lots of you who attended the public forums, and Councilmember Waters, who really helped to guide and shape a lot of this work. So first of all, what we're going to do today is just kind of go through what the public involvement process was, what the visualizations look like, and at the end we're going to ask you to essentially accept the report. This is not an approval of a plan because this is not a planning level document. This is a visualization for the future, and I would say a pretty exciting one at that. So let's start off with the City Council vision. This may look familiar to you. This is the 20-year goal. Longmont will have a developed Main Street from Pike to 66 in the River Corridor. That stretches from Sugar Mill to the fairgrounds. And particularly this piece around a vibrant economic, residential, cultural, and entertainment epicenter that is sustainable and respects the natural environment. So you've already been doing work around the respect to the natural environment side. So let's now take a look at how do we make it an epicenter of all these things. We called this project the STEAM, Building STEAM, kind of riffing on the idea that in the schools right now, science, technology, engineering, arts, and mathematics is a pretty well-known idea. And when we talk about how do we make an epicenter of science, technology, entrepreneurship, arts, maker spaces, it kind of has the same letter. So we decided to use that in order to have people really identify with what we're trying to create in this area. So just to go through related efforts really quickly, the Main Street Corridor project. So Erin was an amazing partner through this process because she was also running the Main Street Corridor process at the same time as the council directed. And so we held a lot of similar meetings and had a lot of boards at the same events that we were able to tag team and talk into. This is Main Street Corridor Plan. First and main TOD, obviously the Resilient St. Vrain project is a huge piece of this since we're talking along the work, because we're talking about visualization along the river and the Dickens nature area. So we started with the idea from the council. What's the vision that you want to see, and how do we actually start to create pictures around what this is going to look like in the future? And so we had an advisory panel. We had 51 members that were at some point part of the advisory panel, and we had 3 meetings. This really guided the rest of the work that you're going to see that we're going to present tonight. So the first meeting was really around idea generation. So we chose a geographic area that I'll show you in just a second, which I think you have in your packets as well. And they really generated ideas around what should be in this area. Once they did that, we went through and refined and created some, I will call them Lego block maps. You'll see them in a second, giving some ideas on where we might put some things that they came up with for ideas. Then we asked them to create a narrative vision for the different categories in which they had created themselves as part of the facilitation. You have that in your packet for your reference. And we'll talk about the categories in a second. And then we really went to the rest of the community. We took a lot of these pictures and the visualizations and the mapping and took it to the community and said, okay, what do you think? What do you like about this? What are you concerned by? What are the things that you'd like to see? And you'll see those recommendations in a few minutes. At the end, we went through and did a council action brainstorming. And so Aaron's going to present on those at the end, really around what would they recommend for you into the future. Okay, so then you can see the rest of the community involvement. We went to Cinco de Mayo and Rhythm, and we went to the Neighborhood Group Leaders Association. We did an online engagement, which is still out there with this presentation out there now so that people can see what happened from their input, as well as the public meetings that we held at the library, senior center, and museum. I should mention too, we printed out these slides as our normal practice, but there are a couple things that are reordered. So this is the correct slide deck, but the changes are very minimal from the one in your packet. Okay, so I mentioned that first group got together and talked about what are the things we need to make sure that we're considering in this geographic area. These are the categories that really emerged. And as I said, in the notes that I've attached to your council packet, you'll be able to see the narratives that people really created around what their visions are for these different areas. This is a picture of the current conditions. And I think one of the things that we talked about that was compelling to folks was, you know, is this what you're looking for in the end? Is this what we want to have in 20 years, for example? Is this the epicenter that we want? And in many cases, there's an awful lot of opportunity. We got to meet with some of the landowners during a couple of the public meetings that were excited about the different opportunities that people came up with. And some concerns as well, which I'll share with you. This is the first Lego block map. There were two of these that kind of divided into two sections for this geographic area. And this really highlights what are some of the ideas that they came up with for this area. So things like making sure that there was a hotel, perhaps, or let me flip this here, office buildings, a conference center. There was lots of conversation about housing. That's really important to folks. And of course, the parking that needs to go along with the housing. And they talked about what kinds of housing may work best in different areas. They also talked about the transit center. On the other side, you'll see things around the higher education campus. It was also important for people to have some parks or some green space that's intermixed in there and not a big block of just buildings. That one came up a couple different times. You'll see here that this is also where we have some additional maker spaces, some more parking, etc. So which ideas from the task force resonated the most? So we did lots of different surveys. We used option power so people could vote so that they were able to get individual votes on what kinds of things they liked out of these different maps that they saw. And what they were really excited about were the higher education campus, the makerspace concept, hotel and convention centers was something that people were interested in, and then mixed use buildings. When we asked about housing, for the most part, people were interested in mixed use in this arena. And of course, the parking to go along with it. We did ask about different kinds of parking. Parking structures were something that people were interested in. We recognize that there's some cost to that that's different than surface, but that was something that they preferred. And the overall mix of use. They like the idea of mixing residential with entertainment, with maker spaces, with education, so that it becomes a vibrant center. And then finally, the live-work units. A couple of the areas of concern for people were the intensity and density of the height. And you'll see in some of the pictures, some people were like, oh, that maybe looks too big. Of course, these are not planning level documents, so it just gives you a vision of what it might look like. And if there were higher buildings, they should be multi-use, not just straight apartment buildings, but some sort of retail on the bottom floor. There were some specific property owner concerns, particularly around Emory Street, going through or not going through. There were a couple folks that were interested in what's going to happen once the Dickens Farm Park opens and whether kayakers will stop parking on his yard. We'll work on that. And those kinds of things. And so, but for the most part, the property owners, at least that I spoke to, were excited about the concepts. Of course, they still own the property here as well, so of course they're excited about the concepts. The growth and effect on the environment. This is right along the river corridor, so that was a serious concern for us. We made sure that any kinds of maps that you see has a setback from the river. And then some people were kind of both ways. We certainly had people that were really interested in a performing arts center and people who were really not interested in a performing arts center, which I found to be kind of interesting, considering that most people wanted a hotel and convention center. But there was kind of a 50-50 on the performing arts center. The parks and green space, the same thing. I think people felt like there was a reason to have some, but maybe it wasn't as important as some of the other amenities that they were seeing. And then the mixed reviews on housing. So people wanted affordable housing. People thought high-rise housing. People thought, no, it should be something different. Everybody agreed that housing needed to be a component. But what exactly it looked like really was every single person's perspective. Okay, so let's look at some more maps. So this is the next level of the Lego block map. This is kind of the next what it might look like. And you can start to see that this is the new maps based on all of the input from the public. You can see the makerspaces there, the education campus. You can see the concepts flowing through to the other side as well. And then we actually had Daniel Tall, who has done some great work for us in visualizations, tried to draw out what would this look like? What might it look like from the perspective of the street or a drone or something to that effect, as opposed to the Lego blocks and the top views, which are sometimes hard to conceptualize. So as you can see, there's the trees. You can see where the creek is. These were some of the maps which, you know, people really appreciated the mixed use appliances, but were concerned sometimes when it was just an apartment building. Am I hitting the same thing again? Am I going sideways? There we go. Performing arts complex. Housing. Education campus. So I'm going to turn it over to Aaron Fosdick now to kind of go through the action and the recommendation steps that came from this group. Like I said, these are not, we're not asking you to take action on these today. This is for you to consider if you decide to continue forward with the progress here. And these are just slightly different order than in your packet, so she'll go through those with you right now.
Good evening, Council. Erin Fosdick, Planning and Development Services. So Sandy kind of provided an overview of the process, and what I want to end with is just the recommendations from the advisory panel. As Sandy mentioned, the advisory panel that was convened earlier this year met 3 times over the course of the year, really started out with generating ideas. What's a vision for this area? What would the community like to see? Started focusing on some specific topic areas, land use, transportation, business mix. And then really at the last meeting, which is where I'll focus, is we convened the group to really continue the conversation. We wanted to share what we had heard with the public, share the more detailed rendering. Sandy just gave you a preview of that. And then really ask in terms of next steps, what did this group recommend that council should focus on in order to move this vision forward? And so as we talked about with this group, and as Sandy mentioned, these are visionary documents. They're not planning level documents. We have a couple options that this group reviewed. We voted with them. And then we broke into groups and really talked about, in order to make something happen here, what would be most important. And so I'm going to share with you the recommendations that came from this group. One of the things that you'll see is there's a lot of crossover between what the advisory panel recommended and what the community at large provided their input on through surveys and public meetings. Probably the most agreed upon area was sort of in this use mix around library, education, cultural, and entertainment uses. Specifically, a lot of interest from the advisory panel on the library. I will say that the library director was there, so there was a lot of conversation in some groups, but I think that this came up in more than one group. You'll see in these slides a number after some of these. We asked the members of the advisory panel to dot vote on the top recommendations, and so these were kind of the top vote getters. So you'll see that library and kind of aggregating these types of uses, library, makerspace, cultural and performing arts, got a lot of votes here. There was also a lot of conversation, great conversation, and with some of our educational partners in the community about how do we combine some of these uses with educational uses, and that was an important component to this group, thinking about those partnerships and leveraging different type and non-traditional partnerships in this area. As Sandy mentioned, there was a lot of conversation about housing and development in general. And so the advisory panel felt that adding housing in this area was important, and thinking about how do we integrate affordable housing throughout this area. Also thinking about not only residential, but how do we encourage primary employment uses in this building STEAM area. A lot of conversation, both with the advisory panel and with the community as a whole, about density, intensity, and height. And as Sandy mentioned, that was an area of kind of mixed reviews with the community. I think a little less so with the advisory panel, and certainly some of you participated in this, so you can check me if my summary is incorrect. But I think the advisory panel really felt like this was an area where we could embrace density, increase building heights, really through kind of those mixed use developments, but also that we needed to get community support for that. And also really needing to think about how do we look at housing with other uses such as transportation, our natural environment, as well as some of the cultural and entertainment uses we looked at on the previous slide. We also had some support for thinking about the environment, the natural environment, sustainability, as well as transportation. And so several of the advisory panel members focused on thinking about using the SES tool that council just spent a little bit of time talking about, thinking about the river corridor itself and how do we really protect that amenity, thinking about standards that are protecting the environment, but that also are inclusive and still enabling some of the redevelopment that we're thinking about. From a transportation perspective, there was a lot of conversation about parking, as Sandy mentioned, but also really thinking about multimodal transportation. Obviously, one of the related projects we've been looking at is thinking about the First and Main transit-oriented development and how this area can really leverage some of the improvements that are already being planned for. So the advisory panel talked a lot about that. A few people talked about creating car-free areas and thinking about how we deal with parking maybe a little bit differently in this area. And then finally, some of the recommendations that were made, and you have the full list that the advisory panel came up with in your packet. And so these are kind of the top vote getters from each of the group. But there was some general recommendations that made the list, and I think those are maybe really setting the stage for kind of some of the additional planning level and logistical things that might need to be considered. And that's really thinking about some additional data gathering, thinking about how council interacts and how council approves certain things before moving development forward, what the process for kind of adopting or accepting this plan looks like, thinking about zoning and continuing to think about our land development code, and then kind of thinking about, as Councilmember Waters talks about, full steam ahead and what are the next steps for this project. And so with that, we'd be happy to take any questions that you might have, or happy to hear from certainly council members that participated in this project.
All right, I guess Councilmember Peck.
Thank you, Mayor Bagley. So Sandy and Aaron, this is just information only. When you say adopt, what are we're not adopting anything tonight. Okay, that was my question. Thank you.
Mayor Bagley, Councilmember Peck, we're asking you to accept the report, essentially. This is the work of the task force, which had, like I said, 51 members. We were able to interview, I would say, probably with all the different festivals, probably 100 people at least. There was lots of interest, lots of excitement around, hey, this could be Longmont. Yeah, this could be Longmont. But it's a visualization level. So tonight, the action that we're asking from the council is to accept the report.
Dr. Waters?
Thanks, Mayor Bagley. I want to say a couple things. First of all, I want to say thanks for you three and Tony for the great work that you all did as staff on this. I was just kind of along for the ride. I'm real impressed with how this came together, and I appreciate your efforts. This afternoon, I had a chance to visit with the consultants hired by LaPie and Visit Longmont, the consortium that has retained consultants to help with a feasibility study on a performing arts and conference center. And I was asked to visit with them only because I had some role in this. And they wanted just kind of a high level, what was my take on it, so I rambled on about it. But I will tell you this, their comments at the end of that conversation were to reflect on how, I don't know if extraordinary would be the word, how unusual it is for a municipality to have brought together a vision with the dimensions, the scope, the detail, the variety, and the synergy that this represents as the basis for their work, right? They now have to decide what would be the best uses from their from their study and their recommendations, best use of land, and whether or not the ideas that surfaced during this process in terms of performing arts and conference center are viable business models to go with it, and all that stuff. But what struck me was how struck they were that they have a chance to step into a context to do their work given what's happened here, and how much richer their work will be because of what you all have put together. So thanks for what you've done.
Councilmember Rodriguez.
Thank you, Mayor Bagley. Just a quick question as to what would be the potential timeline for an actual planning document surrounding this project?
Mayor Bagley, Councilmember Rodriguez, if the council decided that that's the direction that they'd like to go, certainly I'll be meeting with Joni Marsh. We've already started talking a little bit about how we could be able to merge this into that next step. So I can't give you a timeline today, because if that's the direction that council would like to go, we'd be happy to bring back that information.
Councilmember Martin.
Thank you, Mayor Bagley. I have one question and then a comment. The question is, building on Aaron's idea of the timeline, I think any timeline probably is going to have a relationship to the outcome of the feasibility study that is ongoing. And there were maybe a couple of milestones that it's Johnson, isn't it? Organization is coming out. Is it possible to talk about what those milestones are along the lines of a timeline?
So Mayor Bagley, Councilmember Martin, all that I know is that I know when I spoke with Nancy Rizak from Visit Longmont about when was the final report supposed to come to you all, it was the end of the year was what she was shooting for, was to have some information by the end of the year. I'm sure there's a milestone in between, but that was her goal.
Okay, thank you. And then the sum up then, the meaning of acceptance is sort of, yes, we understand this report, we find it consistent with the city council vision adopted by this council, and we think it's a faithful representation of what the various activities were. That's what you mean by accept, is that correct? Okay, because that's what I mean by accept. If nobody else has any comments, I would move acceptance.
Yeah, okay. It's been moved by Councilmember Martin and seconded by Councilmember Finley. Let's vote. And that passes unanimously. All right, let's move on to mayor and council comments. Or actually, sorry, final call, public invited to be heard. Anybody here want to come say anything? All right, let's go on to mayor and council comments. Councilmember Finley.
Thank you, Mayor Bagley. My last council meeting is tonight, and I just wanted, I'll have an opportunity to do this again, but I wanted to thank my fellow council members, Mayor Bagley, Mayor Coombs, and all the council members who served with me over the last 8 years. It's been a great ride. I really appreciate our staff and their professionalism, and I wish you all the best going forward.
All right. City manager, any remarks?
No comments, Mayor, Council.
Eugene?
No comments, Mayor.
All right.